And you can say that there is this Protestant theologian. He talks about God behind God. It's basically from him I have the idea. He says that there's the God of our terminology, of our concepts, of our dogma and our doctrine. But then behind that there is the source of this God. And that source is something else. That's something we cannot put words on. And as soon as I read that, I was like, well, that's a near-death experience. I mean, that is, for me, that is one of the more powerful experiences where you really get close to the source. So therefore, the light behind God, in the same thinking of him, that we have something behind God. And I got that confirmed. I did in my questionnaire, I did some yes and no answers, but I also did multiple choice, so I could see the highest score. So I did a list of like 15 words. I asked each NDE, what is the core and essence of your experience? And then I had a long list of 15, 18 words, like heaven, the essence of life, God, the light of God, and everything. And I saw the light, definitely, I connected it to some form of being and God in a way. But because I was in this intense love, I felt I was in heaven in a way. Or it's kind of divine, heavenly in a way. So I would have picked heaven as the highest score. But that only scored 40%. My highest score in my study was 80%. That was the word God. And then 73% was the light or the light of God. So that was like, okay, so we have a connection to God here. So that has really centered around my conviction that we are talking about experiences here, the source of what inspires religion, or what religion and spirituality is talking about. So that's been very much part of my project. And to explain why that is now my project, it's probably, I think, my life review. If you want to put 2 words on that, it's the golden rule. I mean, what you do to another, you do to yourself. Because that is really, when you're on the receiving end, when I'm on the receiving end of my mother, an ex-girlfriend, this little girl in 2nd grade, when I'm inside her experiencing the consequence of my own action, that is really, I mean, that's what the words mean. What you do to another, you are doing to yourself. That's the life review. And multiply by 100 to 1,000 times, right? So this is no little thing. The golden rule is not just like, hey, it sounds nice, and of course we should love our neighbors and stuff like that. No, I mean, I've been through this life review, and hey, this thing is big, and it's real, and my God, I actually think it's a good idea. And I think it's such a good idea that I think it's such a good idea that I would like to tell others too that it's a good idea. So it's such a good idea. Actually, I wanted just to read, because I just had a few lines from my book here. There's one point that I would like to make to mainstream society and mainstream religion. And this is basically what I will read to you right now. And this is about fundamentalism, or this narrow-mindedness where you are unable to accept differences, and a neighbor that is in another faith, for instance, or from another country. These days, there's really a lot about accepting brothers and sisters and neighbors in another faith. That's really important. So what I write here: if we listen to the evidence from people that have NDEs, then we can get out of this conflict of fundamentalism and not accepting others, by understanding that loving God and obeying the golden rule are in fact one and the same. Since God is in everything, God is also in our neighbor, even if this person believes in another God. And thus, by loving our neighbor, we're also loving God. So, if we put the love of God and the golden rule together, instead of putting the commandment to love a specific God first or higher, then we will find that the 2 commandments are one and the same. And that for me is really, I think that for me is one of the most powerful messages from the near-death experience. Really to understand the Mayan said in Lakesh, I am the other you. I actually put that in my research. It's in there as well. And now I don't remember the score, but I think we're close to almost 80% who agree to the statement, I am the other you. There is no you and me. There is only another you. that is Mayan wisdom. And that is really for me what the golden rule is. That's what I experienced. And I really believe that it is at that deep level that the golden rule is meant. And then because we have to multiply, and I tried it, I actually think it's very real. So that really led me to my research project. And of course, you know, I do get a little bit, you know, involved. Sometimes I might say something that from a spiritual point of view is considered a little bit political. You know, sometimes religion is political. You know, we know that and we see that. So I think the best way to explain how I came about was really my psychotherapy, remember the two worlds that was split for me? There's no way I could unite them because the new world was really so much bigger and so much more real than life here. So I couldn't put them back together, so I had to keep them separate, and that brought me to duality. And that's where I am today. The philosopher Rene, he actually introduced this concept. We haven't gotten over it yet. So the only way I can reconcile the way I see the world, the divine and the physical, is by seeing it in duality. And it makes sense for me, because if you ask, you know, when I came back, I had to ask, why are these people dying in Africa? Why is there war and conflict? You know, how can God allow this? Well, if you ask a question, if you try to answer the question, how can God allow it, that becomes pretty difficult if you want to say that God is responsible for everything. Your explanations are going to go pretty, I've heard some pretty funny ones. But so for me it makes sense that we have free will, we're in this physical world where, yeah, sure, I think God, where I went, is the essence of it, and it's inside the physical. But it cannot control everything because it's another dimension. There are two realms, therefore duality. And for me, that's really, studying philosophy, that was really the only way, and coming back from my own experience, that's really the only way. So, in my way of seeing the world, it's not about which world is the real one or is the right one. It's not this fight, this struggle for black and white and against good and evil. For me, the struggle is, how do I find balance? And you find in some traditions, you find this concept of having two truths. And when you have two truths, well then which one is the real one? Well, who's right, who's wrong? Well, it comes back to balance. And that comes back to one of the greater teachings that I ran upon while I was on my spiritual path and trying to learn about my experience, was that in actually the Sufi tradition, that is an offshoot from Islam, they have, everybody knows about ascension. We all want to ascend. Sure. So what do we do, like me or the other people who actually ascend and meet God? And hey, wow, and we get sent back down. Then what? You can't stay, and now you have to live, and you're like, oh my God, what happened to me? And now you're confused, right? So the Sufis actually have ascension, but then they also have something called descension. You have to descend again. And this can be difficult because, oh, it's really nice. This love, I mean, if you don't have the life review or any bad experiences like me, then it's all very nice. It's very, very nice. You want to stay. You don't want to go back, right? That's what everyone tells you. So, but then if you're sent back, you want to stay, and then you're sent back and you're struggling with your experiences. You might have mental problems because of it. You might suffer depression because having found God hurts, because if you have to leave again and come back down to earth, it's not as warm and as pleasant as being up there. And then you start to see, you experience this profound love. And then you start to see, you turn on your TV, you see the people in Africa, you see the people fighting, you see the war, and you're like, oh my God, how can they do this? How can they do this? And so the reconciliation is really, for me, the balance. And that's where the Sufi teach your second ascension. Once you have ascended once, found God, you come back down, and that can be very painful and very difficult. And then once you come back down and you find your ground and you're like, okay, now I get it. Now I'm no longer confused. Now I'm trying to find a balance within me, balance between body and soul. That's really what it is. A lot of traditions, they reject the body. It's dirty, it's unclean, and then they become very focused on purity, and then you reject, and the rejection is, I don't think that's what it's about. Not in my experience, at least. It's really about how do we harmony. Harmony, I think. That balance, harmony, for me, really makes sense. That is really what I would take from my experience and the way to reconcile, reconcile my experience. So, once you found that balance, Now starts the second ascension. But what's different in the second ascension compared to the first ascension is that now you found God. And now you found balance within you. You reconciled your differences and you found this balance with God. And then the question becomes, well, what should I do with my life? You know God is true, you know the golden rule is real, and now you want to ascend the second time. What should I do with my life? And yeah, so I went a little bit, maybe a little bit too much. I joined Greenpeace. And I climbed buildings about climate change is real, listen to me, and boats and climbing on ships, and I was a young boy still, so it was fun, yeah. And so so I was like, hey, hello, wake up, and I was hanging these banners, and then a war started, and I started campaigning against the war, and ended up suing my government for an illegal war, and I joined a lot of social volunteers for different social activities, social justice issue. I did some more climate change. I ended up with human rights, and today now I'm really coming back to human rights. I started out, I went different ways, and then somehow I come back to human rights. And I really think if you read the Declaration of Human Rights, that's the golden rule. And they even say it. They will say it in some other documents, but they won't say it too obviously, because the reason we have human rights and we're, at least in Europe, we've become more secular, is because of the history and the manipulation and everything. So we can take out of religion, we can still take the golden rule, because even in philosophy, or we gotta live together, right? I mean, if we kill each other a little bit too much, then that's difficult, right? So even if you take God out of the picture, you can still argue with logic that maybe the golden rule is not a bad idea. And so we got human rights. So basically, that's where I am today, and that's what I'm working in today. I'm really trying to focus on human rights, because that makes sense to me to argue that human dignity. I mean, when I was having this little girl against the wall and calling her bad names, I was taking her dignity. And that was probably the biggest problem of, that was the biggest scar in her, that she was something lower than me. We were not equal as two souls, two persons. Just a person should treat each other as equal. So for me, that really comes back to dignity. And dignity is, of course, I mean, shouldn't torture people, but it's also poverty. I mean, there's enough to go around. Wall Street doesn't have to, buy 5 yards, and, I mean, there should be enough to go around. And yes, you're responsible, but we don't have equal starting points. We don't have same social conditions, so we need to even out the differences. So for me, dignity and equality as human beings is really where I'm at today. So you can say that even in my research, I really want to communicate this message. So where I am today, I'm working on a new book, and I'm very focused and very seriously, I want to prove in an academic way that the near-death experience is a mystical experience. It is equal to the great saints of Christianity. It is the exact same experience. So I believe by writing a full book and doing a full research project on this, which I've done now, I think I've done this for 1.5 years or maybe 2 years. I've done this research, and I'm still working on it. I have questionnaires, so after the Q&A session, if there are any NDEers here who would like to contribute to this mission I'm trying to carry out, I have a questionnaire that I would like you to fill out. I still need people to take part. But basically what I'm doing is I'm asking people about the near-death experience, but I'm using the language and the terminology of a mystical experience. And if that scores high, that means we have a match. And that is going to be my next project, because making that case and making it, that's why I studied a little academic and stuff, so I can at least sound clever when I make the case. Yeah? Because I gotta tell you, some of these people in university, I mean, first they don't like God and everything, and I got bullied, I argued with my teachers, and oh my God, what a ride. But I've learned their tactics, so-called intellectuals. I know how they think now. So, they say, what is the art of war? You gotta know your enemy. So I know how they think now. So I'm really trying to make a solid case that the near-death experience is a mystical experience. And I think once you made that case, you can't really say that, my religion is, because, it's universal. And I really think the golden rule, we find it everywhere, and it tells us that our neighbor is equal to us in dignity and everything. That also means, I have these videos. I have more than 100 videos, as Dave told. So I asked for it. I did, say, I instead of calling it the light, I would call it heaven. I know I should keep it in the NDE term. Everything has to be in compartments, right? Because then there's order, right? But so I break the compartment. And I don't say the light, I say heaven and so forth. So I get these rather emotional Christians writing me messages, and they always come back to it. But I say, hey, I'm just trying to love my neighbor. I say, it's not about loving your neighbor. Forget it. It's about being saved. And I'm like, okay. What does that mean, and how does it work? And then, because I actually included a longer email discussion with one of my I call them my teachers. I don't want to call them offensive names. Okay, we can call them funnies or whatever. But I'm actually listening to them. I'm learning from them, and saying, what is wrong with them? No. There was somebody from the media here, and I will just cut that out. That would be a beep or a no comment. No. Really, coming from a human compassion point of view, I want to know why they think so. I want to know how does this saving thing work, right? Yeah, you just say the name or accept Jesus, and then you're saved. Like, wow, cool. So I can just do that, and I can just go back to hurting girlfriend. Just wow, I'm gonna have fun again, right? So I try to study the thinking here, because how do we bring light to this issue? Some people say leave it alone and stuff, but then I was campaigning against the war, and then I was like, why are people so? How did we get to Iraq? I'm bewildered, right? And then I see, well, you got 87% of certain Christian groups, and they also have the thing that God is angry, and they actually support war. I say, hey, okay, let's talk about that. Maybe, are you sure God is angry? Are you willing to bet that God is really angry? So that's the conversation I want to have, because I actually, as I said, I took in all the pain and suffering of the world. And, there's just no way I can tell you what that feels like. But, we can multiply 1,000 or more. You cannot take in all the pain of the world. It is impossible. And the only way I got out of it was I made the promise to the light, God, whatever. I have to do something about it. So today I'm working on poverty and climate change. The impacts are felt in Africa. Horn of Africa right now are paying for our refusal to do anything about climate change. They're suffering. They're taking the brunt. We will work our way around it. We might have to add a little to the budget or whatever, but we will survive. But and then the human rights issue. So that is really, for me, that is really my way to try to impact it. So coming back to my book again. What I did, this was a kind of this book was important to me because from my first book, I knew what I experienced when I was short. And then I looked at religion, it was the same. But then I was like, okay, do other near-death experiences agree with me? And so this was this book, and that was how I got to this title. So that was really me asking about the nature of the light. I call the research project the nature of the light. But I used religious terminology because I was sure there was a match. But taking it to the near-death experience meant that instead of me writing my book, and I could go a little bit like, I'm the new prophet, and my experience is the only real one. The other one, no, they didn't go all the way, and I went further, and all that kind of stuff, right? I could do that, right? But I'm like, I'm not quite sure that my experience was everything. There could be more, right? So let's ask. Let's try to. So the reason I apply, you could say, empirical research is just to, ask, do we agree or not? Does this fit or not? So if I have 70, 80, or 90%, when I ask, is God inclusive? 93% agree. Okay, is God love? It's 100%. So when you get to the 80s, the 90s, the 100, you know that is something we can pretty reasonably conclude that is something that most near-death experiencers will agree to. And then, of course, when you go down lower, then doubt becomes there, and then you can say, okay, this is something we don't know about. So I really try to apply a sense of objectivity to my research, because I think you will hear everybody say, Lars, I cannot explain the pain, how great it was, and I cannot explain the true nature of my experience. You will hear people say, I know what I experienced and I know it's true, but I can't really define it. It's beyond human comprehension. And that's what God is. And that's why, because it's beyond our comprehension, certain things we can say is love, you got to love your neighbor and really love your neighbor, it's true. And we can say certain things, but if we go too far, we might really go into our own subjective experience. So I really want to take it step by step, and that's what I try to do with this book. And that really set me on a course of reassuring me that we are really talking about true, real, mystical experiences of God. Call it something else, we're talking about the same thing. And the only reason we have to use the label God is just because there's no other label that can incorporate such a huge experience. And then we can discuss what we mean by God. That's something else, but I think we need to use that. And so that's really where I am now with my research, that I'm trying to make the case that the Bible says that God is in all, through all, and over all. It's God is omnipresent. And if that is true, and if God speaks to us in mysterious ways, well, then why not in a near-death experience? Life after death, heaven and hell, and what have you, the golden rule, it's all there in religion. Here are these people today, right? Hey, that's what they're saying. So I say, hey, let's, why not study this? Of course, if you want to hold on to your tradition, your doctrine, and your dogma, you don't want this. You see this as a challenge. So actually, part of my writing right now is taking on some of the science of the brain arguments that these experiences are not a hallucination. Because, believe it or not, I actually contacted a couple of universities because I thought, hey, this my new project would be a good master's or maybe PhD or something. And so I said, hey, let's try some of the big universities. And I say, I'll send an email to the head, the dean of the religious faculty. Say, hey, let's study this. We're already doing that, but through science, and that it's an illusion. And we're very convinced it's just an illusion, right? So you got religious faculties who study religion, now studying science in some of the leading universities in the US, in Canada, McGill, where I live in Montreal, all over. Religious faculties are studying the science of the brain to argue that near-death experiences are hallucinations. Why would they go into science? I know why I'm doing it, but why would they, right? They're religious faculties. They are scared, so they need to defend themselves. And I got 2010 book from Oxford University. A guy there, he has a PhD in neuroscience and theology. So they're using this guy with his book 2010 to say that, forget it, when Paul falls off the horse, he has a hydrocephalus. That is real, because, my God, that is real. But my God, that sounds so similar. Yeah, but that is real, and you can't test it, it's too late. But these people today have the same experiences. No, that is a hallucination, because that we don't like. So that is I think that will be my future battle on a spiritual level. So again, the two worlds, I never put them back together. So I'm doing my writing, I'm doing my research, which is my spiritual mission. And in the physical work, I'm doing my human rights work and non-profit and trying to help people. So I'm trying to do both worlds. And that's why I laughed a little bit when Dave said that he's going to try to introduce me. I said, you can't, because I live in both worlds. So where are you going to put me, and how are you going to put your finger on me? That is really difficult, because I am spirit, energy of pure love, from the source of that light, God, call it whatever. That's who I am. And I'm just visiting this body for a period of time. I don't know how long it is. And in that time, I have to love my neighbor. That's all I care about. And so for the time I'm here, the more the better. Human rights, writing books, arguing against the universities, whatever I can do to make the case that it is really all about love. And our purpose here is really to love our neighbor. I got a lesson. I'm not sure, it's from one of the spiritual books, that what is not given is lost. I don't know if anybody knows that quote, but what is not given is lost, is the quote. Yeah, I don't remember where it's from. But anyway, that struck me, that each chance we have to give something, to give love, to give help to another person, that is really, and actually, outside the church in Ottawa, I found the same quote. It was a 89-year-old who said that what we do for ourselves dies with us, but what we do for another lives on forever. And that is really, when you're in the light, that's the only truth you need to think about. Any chance we can give to somebody else is a chance that lives on forever. Every time we think of ourselves, it stays here. I mean, because what is it? It's fear of survival, it's our patterns, whatever. It's all connected to here. What's connected to the higher, the divine, is really what we do for another. And that is really, that is really, for me, that's what it's about. So that's what I've decided to do, and I'm still going to do what I'm going to do, because I have absolutely no doubt that that's really what it's about. And I think that's the conclusion. All the researchers, I mean, Atwater, she says, 4,000 cases, one word, love. I mean, that's what it is. So that's really, yeah. So I got a 10-minute sign here.
Loving 10 minutes.
Loving 10 minutes. Yes, exactly. That's why I'm happy I took the chair, so I could be a little more. Sometimes I can talk fast too, especially if I didn't have my coffee though. I'm used to the little cups, because I'm from Europe, and anyway, so that's good. But I think it's a good way to talk, and I'm actually looking forward to the next session where we get to have a little dialogue, because I'm not, I'm just kind of talking. I wrote down 2 or 3 points I wanted to say, but I've just kind of been talking. So I'm not sure, where I went or what happened, but so I'm hoping in the next hour that you guys really ask me what you want to ask about. And like I said, we can talk about me, my experience, we can talk about my research, we can talk about the evidence, we can talk about not about too much about the future and stuff like that, but we can talk about anything you'd like. And yeah. Can we take an early break? Sure. That felt like a natural. Does that sound good?
All right.
Okay.